Alrighty, okay, I guess we could start since it's 1:01. So my name is Gladys Snowfit. I am the Deputy Title IX Coordinator here at Fresno City College. And before we start, I kind of want to go over some house rules. We're gonna save all questions until the end, just because it's a lot of information. And maybe your question will be answered throughout this presentation. And so I tend to speak pretty fast. So I'm gonna try to in a very calm and collected manner today. But if I do speak very fast, please just make sure that you're like, hey, slow your roll, please. So I will try my best to do so. So today, you're gonna learn a lot of things. There's gonna be a lot of information thrown at you today. We're gonna talk about Title IX, what it is. We're gonna talk about subsequent related protections related to Title IX. We're gonna talk about what it includes. We're gonna talk about terms and definitions. Responsible employee and what it is, how to report a Title IX incident or a violation. We're also gonna go over the college or the district's obligations under Title IX and the Title IX investigation and its process, and then my contact information as well. And then we also have scenarios at the end. And I also just want to add that the topics we'll be discussing is sensitive in nature. And so, it may cause you to feel uncomfortable or trigger you in some sort of way. So if you need a break, please step out. And this is being recorded. I think it's being recorded, right? Okay, so it's being recorded. So, you can watch this at a later time as well too. Also, the presentation is gonna primarily focus on the 2020 regulations. We do have new regulations out this year, but there's some legal issues, and so we can't implement them just yet. And so I'm just gonna focus on the 2020 regs for now. There are changes, but they're not substantial enough to affect the information I'm gonna give you today. All right, so Title IX, it states that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So what does all of that mean? Let's go ahead and break it down. So it's a civil rights law that was enacted in 1972. It started out as a women's rights law and it became more of an equity-based law. And then it protects people like you and me and our students. So pretty much anyone and everyone who's associated with Fresno City College or the district office. And so it protects us from sex and gender-based discrimination on our campus, in our educational programs and activities, because we are an institution that receives federal funding because we get financial aid. So it applies to us. And so related protections. So since the beginning of Title IX, there had been additional laws and regulations that have been enacted to further define what it is and kind of inform us on how to educate our school communities and what to do. So in 2011, there was a letter that was published by the Department of Education. And basically that letter is called Dear Colleague Letter. And it basically said that there's an epidemic of sexual assaults on campuses and that it needs to be addressed. So it kind of outlines for us like our obligations for us, that we need to do as a college for our students to keep them safe. And so since then, each administration kind of added more rules and more regulations to what's already provided. And so what I mean by administration is every time we have a newly elected president, we'll have new sets of rules and regulation changes or whatever it may be. So the 2024 regulations are from the Biden administration. So there's a lot of changes, a lot of clarity, somewhat, a lot of just a little bit difference in processes. And so that's what we're gonna see. So the Clery Act. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of the Clery Act or probably have heard about it, but kind of, don't necessarily know how it started. So how it started was there was a freshman student, her name is Jean Clery, and she was sexually assaulted and murdered on campus by another student that she didn't know of. And so what happened was her parents, filed a lawsuit and they discovered that the school had 38 other violent incidents prior to, I guess within the 3-year span prior to Jean Clary's death. And they're kind of like, how come no one told us these things? You know, like if we had known, I wouldn't have sent my daughter to school there, right? And so this act basically requires universities and colleges to report, like have a public crime log and report annual security report to for everyone to see, and also timely warnings as well too. And I know, I'm not sure if you all have seen our timely warnings, but that is a picture of an example of what our district sends out when there is a timely warning. So it usually gives out the description of the person who's a suspect on campus or who shouldn't be on campus pretty much, right? And if you happen to see this person, that you would call campus PD right away.
So question, the girl that got murdered like on the railroad tracks, did they ever find who did that to her?
I'm not sure about that one.
Because she was a camp, she was.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was Title IX related or not. So I wouldn't necessarily know, but there should be a no campus PD on their website. They have these reports up, so you can go and check that out as well. And so there is also the Violence Against Women Act, which is VAWA. And this is basically establishing legal definitions of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. And then we also have the Campus Save Act as well, which mandates for prevention and awareness programs on our campus. So I think in short, all of these amendments or rules and regulations that are added on are primarily to kind of clarify things, to guide us, and just for more transparency. So what does Title IX include? It includes athletics, it includes pregnancy-related conditions, and sexual misconduct. So Title IX regulations require schools to provide equal opportunity based on your sex. The requirement applies to the school's athletic programs, including clubs and intramural and intercollegiate sports as well. So basically, it just says that there needs to be equitable opportunities for each gender to play sports, but it doesn't have to necessarily be equal or mirror each other. So that's what Title IX covers for athletics. It also looks into like the women's and sports teams of, you know, their schedulings, how they're recruited, how scholarships are given out, and like the supplies and equipment is also given to each team as well too. And we also look into the students' athletic interests and abilities. So I know that there is a survey that's given out to our students just to see like if there's any interest in certain sports. So for example, women's wrestling just became a thing for us a couple of years back, right? Or I think maybe even last year. But because there was a lot of interest in having a women's wrestling team here. And so we made that happen. And so this is can anyone guess what's going on in these two photos? So there are actually two separate photos. And one's the women's, weight room. One's a women's weight room and one's the men's weight room. Mm-hmm. So this is a very viral picture that has circulated from March Madness in 2021. And so the left side is the women's weight room and the right side was the men's weight room. And so
just say which facility or which entity?
It
wasn't
was
Fresno City, was it?
No. It's for it was for March Madness. I believe LSU.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I might be wrong, but yeah, but I know the NCAA got a lot of heat for it and said like, hey, like this is, you know, everyone was kind of basically saying like, hey, this is wrong, you know, like this is not right. Like the men's definitely got like a full gym with all these equipment, and then the women's side just got some dumbbells and like the yoga mats, right? So this is definitely a good picture to illustrate the inequalities that we have in athletics. So Title IX pregnancy-related conditions. So this applies to pregnancy, childbirth, lactation, miscarriages, abortion, or related conditions, including recovery. So if you have a student who informs you that they are expecting or they're pregnant, and they ask for accommodations, please work with the student to provide reasonable accommodations. If you or the student have any questions, please let me know. Reasonable accommodations is necessarily can't define it because it just depends on your classroom. It depends on what you're able to provide for the student as well, because each class is different. Like, for example, like a science class that requires lab, right? If the student's gonna miss out on like 2-3 weeks worth of lab, that might, you can't really do alternative assignments for that lab. That might not work. The student might have to do an EW. It just depends on the situation. And so work with your student to see if you can provide any alternative assignments. And then employees who are pregnant also have rights under Title IX, and those requests can be made at the district office. I believe we have an accommodations person at district. So yeah, you can contact them. And so let's see, for classes and campus activities, our campus must allow the student to continue participating in classes and extracurricular activities, even though they are pregnant. They are not required to submit a doctor's note. And if the student asks for reasonable adjustments, like a larger desk, more trips to the restroom or breaks, we can offer that as well. And then for excused absences and medical leave, our campus must excuse absences due to pregnancy or childbirth for as long as the doctor says it's necessary. They can allow the student to return to the same academic and extracurricular status as before they went on leave. And allow them to make up work or do alternate assignments. It just depends on what you're willing to do and what would be reasonable for your class. And also provide pregnant students with the same special services it provides to students with temporary medical conditions. So like independent study sometimes, or online classes. I know some classes are doing a hybrid of online and in person. So that can be also a reasonable accommodation as well. So we do have lactation rooms here on campus. On our main campus, it is within the health services, so the nurse's office in their back office. And then we also have a location at West Fresno as well. And the student will have to check out the key from someone at the front desk at the West Fresno office or West Fresno campus. And so I know that we have a lot of construction going on right now. So for our newer buildings, hopefully we can get more lactation space within those buildings as well. So let's get into the terms and definitions. So what is sex and gender-based discrimination? Under Title IX, sex and gender-based discrimination is unfairly treating or denying opportunities or benefits to an individual or group of individual based off of their sex or gender. This includes like gender identity, it includes sexual orientation or pregnancy, and a form of sex-based sexual misconduct. And so I think of it as an umbrella. So sexual misconduct is a big umbrella, and under that, there's like sexual assault and violence, sexual harassment, intimate partners, and domestic violence, and then stalking. I mentioned just these just because they're a part of Title IX. So there are some statistics before we get into actual meat of it all. So for male college students between the age of 18 to 24, about 78% or more likely than non-students of the same age to be a victim of rape or sexual assault. 41.8% of students reported experiencing at least one sexually harassing behavior since enrollment. 18.9% of those reported that it interfered with their academic or professional performance, and 23.1% of transgender, genderqueer, and nonconforming students have been sexually assaulted. And so these are all stats provided by different organizations based off of the different campuses in the United States. Okay, so sexual assault, sexual violence. So sexual assault is the physical sexual acts perpetrated against another person's will, or where a person is incapable of giving consent because of their age or because of their temporary or permanent mental or physical incapacity. There's a common knowledge that if there is the slightest penetration of the genital or anal opening of the body of another person, or oral or anal sexual intercourse is considered sexual assault or sexual violence. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So every April, we try to bring out our CS, which is the Rape Counseling Services of Fresno, and we'll have them do like a mini lecture series. I think for this past April, we did Sexual Assault 101. And so it's a lot of good information. They talk about their services that they provide. They talk about sexual assault and what to do if it does happen, or if it happens to somebody. And so that's kind of it's a month-long kind of mini lecture series. And so if you want to give out extra credit to your students for attending, that will be greatly appreciated. But it's a lot of good, valuable information.
Are they online or are they face to face?
This is in person. So we have been doing in-person mini lecture series for just an hour, and it'll be like, I think last April we did every Tuesday. It's usually around lunchtime, so that way people can come through and like have lunch. We also provide some snacks as well too, but it's a lot of it's open to students and staff as well.
Are you going to plan on coming out to West Fresno Center this year?
If there is interest, then we will. I haven't thought too far about it, just because we just brought them in for April. So we do different, I'm kind of testing out the waters. We do different, I feel like, activities or events for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So we'll do like a resource fair, or we'll bring in someone from the community to come and speak.
Well, I'm expressing interest for West Fresno.
Definitely.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I would love to have my students attend something like this.
Definitely. Okay. So I will make note of that, and I'm hoping we can get someone out there as well too. So let's see, sexual harassment. So sexual harassment is generally unwelcome conduct that is sexual in nature, and it creates a hostile environment. And so there are different ways that it can be sexual assault, or I'm sorry, sexual harassment. The first being quid pro quo is something that we hear a lot about, or often. It's usually it involves an employee or a person who has authority over another person, right? And so there's usually some kind of like advances, like some like, hey, like if you do this, I'll give you that type of situation, right? So that's considered sexual harassment. There's also, we call it SPOO, it's the acronym. It's unwelcome conduct determined by a reasonable person standard. So the conduct has to be severe, it has to be pervasive, and objectively offensive. So that's why it's called SPOO. And basically it denies that person of equal access to their education or activity here on campus as well. And the last is the VAWA terms, which is sexual assault or violence, dating violence, domestic violence, and stalking. So those are what we look for if there is a sexual harassment complaint that comes through. And I just want to mention that for the second prong, or for SPOO, the conduct has to meet all 4 of those things for it to be Title IX or a Title IX violation.
When you say objectively offensive, does that mean that it can be offensive to one person but not another? So it's the person that's receiving the behavior that finds it offensive?
So that would be subjective. Objective is more
yes.
based off of a reasonable standard person. So with this a reasonable person, right, in like a similar circumstance, would they see this to be offensive, or is it like, a person's maybe too sensitive to a subject because they had prior experience involving a traumatic experience or something like that, right? So, but I'll tell you this, the 2024 regulations, they do add subjective and offensive. Oh, and I'm sorry, it's subjective and objective. So you'll have to meet both, or both is taken into consideration. But right now, if we do have reports, we're going off of the 2020 regulations, which states that it's objective.
PowerPoint sent to us.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's recorded, so you'll get sent to you.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Yes. So examples of sexual harassment, there are verbal and non-verbal sexual harassment. So some of the verbal ones is like being flirtatious, making advances, propositions or requests for sexual activities or dates, and they're kind of persistent about it, like, hey, when are you gonna go out with me? Or when are we gonna go out? Or let's go grab a drink. So things like that can be seen as verbal sexual harassment. Also discussing your own or someone else's like sexual activities or fantasies or preferences or history. Also making suggestive comments, like maybe jokes that are sexual in nature, discussion about I guess sexual topics within like the work or the classroom environment, and also making offensive sounds such as like smacking your lips or licking your lips, kissy sounds, or like wolf whistle, which I don't know how to do. So whistling at someone, right? And the nonverbal sexual harassment examples would be kind of invading someone's personal space, getting too close, unwelcome conduct such as displaying like sexual objects, like pictures or just like images like on your clothing sometimes as well too. Making sexual gestures with your hands or body movements, and delivering unwanted like letters or gifts and other items could be sexual in nature. So dating and domestic violence. Dating and domestic violence are actual or threatened physical violence, emotional abuse, intimidation, or other forms of physical and sexual abuse from an individual or a current from an individual in a current or former intimate relationship that would cause a reasonable person to fear harm to themselves or to others. And so again, like Sexual Assault Awareness Month, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And we usually bring out the Marjorie Mason Center to come and do a mini lecture series. Last October, they did Healthy Relationships 101. So it was kind of the same thing. It was like an hour during lunchtime around that time frame. And they'll come every like Thursday, I think, to do a presentation. And the topics are covered. They're different every session. So you're looking for like green flags, red flags, just like what's a healthy relationship, what's not, and there are services that they do provide as well too. So again, if you have students who should be attending, or please give them some extra credit so they can come. We definitely want attendance. Stalking. So stalking is, I want to say this is the one that we see the most on campus. So stalking is engaging in a course of conduct directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety or the safety of others, or suffer substantial emotional distress. This could be following a person to their class, to their car, to their house, to their work, and just leaving messages or unwanted gifts on their property or at their property or whatever it may be. And then there's also cyber stalking, because now everyone is on their phones and, into social media. So it's the same as the regular stalking, but just online. So it's like it's unwelcome phone calls, voice messages, emails, texts, social media posts are all considered cyber stalking.
I had this incident last semester,
Okay.
and the student was getting stalked by another student at the bus stop. If she went into Wendy's, it was freaking her out. And come to find out he was in my class. So we ended up calling the police station.
Okay.
So yeah, it's scary for some of the students, especially the really, really young ones.
Yeah, no, definitely. That is why this is one of the misconducts that we do see on campus a lot more these days. So let's play a little game called Myths or Facts. And I'll reveal the answers at the end. So the first is wearing revealing clothes, behaving provocatively, or drinking a lot means the victim was asking for it. Is that a myth or is that a fact? Okay, yes. And then the next is a person cannot sexually assault their partner or spouse. Let me see. Men are not victims of sexual violence.
Yeah.
And then let's see. If a victim of sexual assault does not fight back, they must have thought that the assault was not that bad or that they wanted it. Okay. So they're all myths. Okay, I was trying to trick y'all. So they're all are myths. And so for the first, in terms of wearing revealing clothes, So just because you're wearing revealing clothes, you drink a lot, you know, you're trying to have a good time with some friends probably, you're not asking for any sexual activity. You're not asking to be, you know, harassed in any sexual nature. And then for the second, a person cannot sexually assault their partner or spouse. So the fact is nearly 1 in 10 women have experienced rape by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Then the third is men are not victims of sexual violence. That is in fact false. 1 in 33 men have been raped, and 47% of bisexual men have experienced some form of unwanted sexual contact in their lifetime. And 1 in 10 rape victims are male. And then the last is, if a victim of sexual assault does not fight back, they must have wanted it, or they didn't think it was that bad. So, you know, when it comes to these traumatic experiences, everybody has their own way of dealing with it and has their own reaction to it, right? And some, you know, in this case, may freeze. And they call it a freeze response. And so where they can't move or they can't speak. So it does happen. So it just, yeah, it depends on the individual. All right, and so it brings us to consent. I love this slide. I love the picture because it's easy to remember. So I love fries. So it's consent is freely given, it's reversible, it's informed, it's enthusiastic, and it's also specific. I'm not sure if y'all have heard of the phrase no means no and yes means yes. So I think before it used to be no means no, but we're kind of going away from that and using yes means yes, because no means no can be, although it seems simple, it can be interpreted in many different ways. So like, you know, back in the day, I think, you know, some people would be like, oh, you know, they're just playing hard to get. So when they say no, it means yes. So that's the, you know, with cultures and stuff like that, that's the misconception, right? And so that's why, you know, we say yes means yes, because yes, there's kind of no interpretation of it, you know, because yes doesn't mean no, it means yes. So that's
Well, and a lot of our cultural things like reinforce like my kids were watching, or my grandkids were watching Pitch Perfect the other day. And there's a lot of sexual innuendo in that, where between two of the characters, the guy's saying, so that means no, and the girl's, yeah, right, that means no, and she winks.
yeah.
And so I think that you're right, that no means no. And I mean, I think that a lot of times in our the movies and shows and things that they watch, the kids are learning that that doesn't always mean no.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's kind of some of the, I want to say in the Healthy Relationships 101, that's kind of what they talk about as well. They show clips from movies, specific movies where it's, for example, like Twilight, the whatever sagas, and like, you know, it's like Edward's in her bedroom. And it's like, when you watch it, you're like, oh, it's so romantic, right? But in actuality, when we're thinking of it, wait, that's kind of a little bit stalkerish, you know, so that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
So exactly, so yes, movies and the things we see on TV these days definitely depict it different way. So yeah, yes means yes, y'all. Yes means yes. All right, so reporting responsible employees. So everyone at the district is considered a responsible employee, and what that means is that you have the authority to report or to help the student, right? In terms of the incident that they were involved in. And so what that means is you will have to report it to me or the Title IX coordinator at district. You don't have to necessarily give us all the details, but you know, the student's name, probably ID number, so that way we can contact the student and give them more information and kind of, you know, talk about what's going on. We have interim supportive measures that we can give as well. And, you know, if they want to file a case, then obviously it would go through us. And so that is, in short, what a responsible employee is and your duties as a responsible employee as well. Okay, so kind of went over this just a little bit already. So what do you do if you become aware of an allegation of sexual misconduct or something is reported to you? You have to let the reporting party know that you're an employee of the district. And so you have to report it to me, and that the district takes complaints of sexual misconduct very seriously. And we do look into the allegations that are being alleged. And if they want to, at that point, stop telling you about what's going on, they can do so. And also, they don't even have to come talk to me. But as long as we've reached out to them, I usually provide resources, a resource packet to the student, and it's up to them whether or not they want to further and discuss things with me, or they can use our confidential reporting outlets or even community resources as well too. So, and then if, the student asks about confidentiality issues, we have to tell them that it's not guaranteed. Even when I do cases, confidentiality isn't guaranteed, just because if there are allegations and a formal complaint is made and a formal investigation is to take place, we have to interview witnesses. We have to let the person who's being accused know of the allegations as well too, because they also have rights. So confidentiality doesn't necessarily, it's not guaranteed, I'll say it that way. And so we also want to reassure the reporting party that that we want to help, because I think, although we may have difference of opinions, I think we all have the same shared goal in mind, which is to help our students, to help them thrive and succeed while they're here. And we want, to create a safe space for everyone, not just our students, but of our employees as well too.
Question.
Mhm.
On that one where it said, you have to let the reporting party know that that you're gonna be telling someone about the incident, and do they want to continue with the conversation? Just from your own experience, how many times does the person continue with the conversation and how many times do they back out?
So I feel like majority of the time they continue with the conversation, because usually if they are telling you about an issue that they're having, that means they want it to stop. And they themselves cannot do it. And so they reach out to someone who has, I guess, the authority to stop it. So say it's usually, it's usually a student and another student in the classroom, right? So I've had situations where, there's a male student who kept touching a female student in class. And she told the instructor, and, she wanted to stop. And the only way that, to make the other student stop is to have the instructor step in and say, hey, you need to stop, right? Or have me step in, or have Sean Henderson step in, right? As a student conduct issue. And so for those who, I have had cases where the student is like, no, I'm gonna deal with this on my own, because it involves, say, I had this one where it involved a male student and a female student, and the male student was the boyfriend of the female student. And so they're like, I'm just gonna handle this on my own. I don't want you to get involved, and that's fine, right? But as long as I provided, or that we provided resources, they can talk to somebody else. They can talk to sex services. They can talk to, depending on the situation, Marjorie Mason Center or rape counseling of Fresno as well too. So they don't necessarily have to talk to me, but we're just giving them options so that they know that they're not alone in this. All right, so kind of talked about it a little bit. So confidential reporting. On campus, we have psych services and also our licensed medical providers at the health services, so our nurses. So anyone acting under their license are considered confidential reporters. Confidential reporting options. So that means that they don't have to tell me. And it's just, doctor-patient privileges or whatever it may be. So, but the 2024 regulations do state that people acting under their license have to give that student or that person my contact information. So they can choose whether or not they want to come to me and talk to me. So that's part of the new regs. But for now, they don't have to report that or give any information if they don't want to. And then we also have the Employee Assistance Program, so EAP, for our employees. That is free and confidential. So that's a service that you can also use. And then for off-campus, we have different community resources. So like the Marjorie Mason Center or the rape counseling services of Fresno. They You can visit their website for more information on the services they offer. It is confidential. They don't tell us if, a student has gone there or employee has gone there. They have their own procedures. And so, yeah, if you want more information, and there's more community resources listed on our Title IX website as well too. So how to report, different options to report an incident. So you can contact me directly through email. That's pretty much the main avenue that I am getting right now is I will get emails from instructors or from deans or from our Karen Bit team or Sean Henderson in regards to a situation that happened or campus PD as well. Students don't actually, there'll be a handful of students who contact me directly, but usually they're telling a counselor or they're telling a faculty member about a situation and then it gets back to me. And then there's also the district Title IX reporting form. So that is an online form. I'm not sure if you guys are, if you all are familiar with Maxient, but all of our cases are housed in Maxient. Yeah, anyone can do the electronic form as well too. It doesn't have to be the student who's involved in the situation. So you can use that or the police department or local police, okay, the campus PD or local police department, but the individual must contact or with their consent, you can contact.
Oh, so you're saying the difference between the second and the third one is the second one, you don't have to have the students or the person's consent, but the third one you do?
Yeah, so in terms of contacting the police, like it's a rule or regulation that we're not able to do so unless you get the student's permission. Like even for me, if there was a case going on, I can't report it to PD. I would encourage the student to report it, but that's ultimately up to them. And I have seen a lot of our cases where they don't want to report it to campus PD. And they, because it's a different process, because once you get campus PD involved or local police, they can file criminal charges. And that's a whole different procedure. And so it gets a little bit more serious. So it just depends on the individual. So we take the individual's what they want into consideration. All right, so let's do another game of true and false. So is it true or false that there are no statute of limitations to report sexual misconduct incidents? But victims can report it at any time, even years later. Do you guys think that's true or false?
I think it's true, but only just recently. But I don't know for sure.
Okay,
No, sure.
okay, so I'll save the answers for the end. The next is police should be notified immediately if you have been made aware of a sexual misconduct incident. So we just talked about this.
That would be false.
Yes, and then the last is the incident must have occurred on campus for it to be a Title IX violation.
I would say false.
Yeah, as long as they're a student, I would say it's false.
Let's see. All right, so the first is true. There is currently no statute of limitations.
Good.
And so it just really depends. So say something happened like years ago, or say it happened a while back, and it doesn't involve parties who are at the campus, right? Then we necessarily wouldn't have jurisdiction. We would probably just provide community resources to them. And so, yeah, but they can report from any time, pretty much.
Do they have to have been a student
At the time of reporting, they have to be a student.
at the time of reporting? They have to be a student.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we already discussed the police one, so that is false. We don't contact police unless we get the consent of the individual or the individual reports it to the police themselves. And then for the last, if the incident occurring on campus, it just depends. So normally we don't have jurisdiction if it happens off campus. However, if say both parties are like a student or employee of ours, then we would have jurisdiction because we have control over both parties, right? So there could be some supportive measures or like sanctions or disciplinary actions, right? And we do have like, study abroad programs, right? Or trips and things happen over there and conferences, from what I've heard from district conferences, things happen at conferences. And so we would still somewhat have jurisdiction, even though it didn't happen on campus. So you're right. This is students' rights, and it also, same thing for employees, same rights. It's, so the rights is to have an adequate and reliable impartial investigation conducted by the institution. The right to not report this to law enforcement, the right to present witnesses and evidence, to have a representative with you during all meetings or any meetings, to be free from retaliation, to review the evidence directly related to the allegations, and provide written responses prior to the investigator finalizing a report, and to have a live hearing before an administrative determination is made, to review the final investigator's report prior to live hearing, to engage in indirect questioning of the parties and witnesses through an advisor, to have any proceedings documented, which may include written findings of facts, transcripts, or audio recordings. You also have the right to not work it out with the accused, and to be informed in writing of the investigation findings and the reasoning behind it, and sanctions that are issued that is related to you, and to appeal the district's final determination. So there's rights on both sides. This is for both the reporting party, so we call them the complainant, and the responding party or the accused, which is the respondent. So Title IX cases versus criminal cases. So we kind of talked about it briefly, but how they're different is Title IX cases, it is within our institution or our district. It's very specific to education codes that we have to follow, and Title IX regulations that we have to follow. We can do interim reasonable supportive measures. We could offer other supportive measures after the fact as well. And students or employees, depending on what happens, they can be subjected to disciplinary actions. And it could be verbal or written reprimand. You can be suspended or expelled. And then also, in terms of Title IX cases, it's not public knowledge. We don't information share with other colleges. I know that has been a topic of conversation as well too. But by law, we don't share as of right now.
So you're saying that an incident has to be posted on the website, but people involved in that incident are not listed?
No, yeah, they're not listed. And I guess the only time you could say it's public knowledge is if, so I would get requests from other college institutions if our student is transferring for athletic reasons or whatever it may be. It's usually the athletics department, and it'll say in there that, does this student have, student misconduct issues or Title IX issues? Usually they don't, but if they do, I'm not sure what would happen because we haven't gotten there yet. But that is the only time where we do say like, hey, there has been an incident, or it's usually a checkbox. So there's no real details. So yeah. And then findings are given to both the complainant and the respondent, but not the witnesses. So any, I guess, documentation we'll give to the parties. And if one receives it, the other one has to receive it as well, just because of due process and that they both have rights. And then for criminal cases, individuals alleged to have committed acts of sexual violence and sexual harassment may face criminal prosecution by law enforcement and may incur penalties because of civil litigation. The police are usually involved in this one. Criminal charges could be filed depending on the crime. And it could be public record, it usually is, if there are convictions and charges, and it will show up on a background check as well too. So the college's obligations under Title IX. So the college has an obligation to take immediate action and investigate in a timely manner. We provide reasonable supportive measures for students and employees. We have the responsibility to provide a safe place for our students and our staff and our faculty and our guests, pretty much everyone on campus. So those are our obligations plus the ones listed in the rights. So that's a lot going on, but you can read that once you have the slides. So the Title IX process, I'll break it down to you for you and I'll keep it short. Once I receive a report, I would probably promptly reach out to the student or the parties and provide them with resources. I do this for both the complainant and the respondent as well, because, you know, just because there's something that happened that is alleged, it might have, it's not, how do I say this? It's not, to say that, you know, this actually happened, right? So we still have to investigate. So, you know, they're both given resources because, you know, they're both probably gonna experience, some kind of, stress over the situation because we take it very seriously. And so there are, resources that are available to both parties. And, depending on the issue, we'll initiate an intake process or an initial assessment with both parties. So just meeting with them, kind of talking about what's going on and, you know, what the issue is. And depending on the conduct and the actions, we may dismiss it because it doesn't fall under Title IX, or we will transfer it to a different department, usually to student services under the dean of student services, just because it's more of a student conduct issue than it would be a Title IX issue. Or both, it just depends on the situation, but and then after making that predetermination, and if say it rises to the level of Title IX, we'll have a full investigation and we'll have investigators ask questions, kind of get everyone's statements. So both party statements, witness statements, and we'll also gather other evidence. So for instance, like when we had some stalking issues, we have cameras on campus. We can request to have camera footages. Some people, you know, say it's a social media thing. Some people will screenshot what's, you know, on their phones, right? So text messages, social medias, posts or whatever it is, they'll give that to us as evidence. And so what the investigator does is they'll compile a big report and they will state the facts and see if it applies or if it meets Title IX. So I'll say it that way. And so, and then there'll be a hearing, and then usually during the hearing, advisors are appointed, and there'll be a decision maker. For us, it will be VP Hall's Dr. Hall, who is our decision maker. And at that time, it's kind of like mini court. So they will get to look at the whole report, get to ask questions. The decision maker will get to ask follow-up questions, say there's something that's not clear. So that will be the time to do that. And then a determination will be made by the decision maker, and then each party will get, you know, their findings. Like, hey, this is what's going to happen, or this, or doesn't meet it, or whatever it may be. And both parties have the right to appeal. So that's, in short, the process. We do have timelines for it. As of right now, I think it's 90 days to investigate, and then 120 days if it's a full investigation with the hearing. But with 2024 regulations, they are scrapping all the dates, I guess, and it's just reasonable time.
Really?
Yes, because I'll say it this way, it depends on the case. I've had cases where I had to interview a whole team, sports team, and it took a while. It took a while because of scheduling, because I'm just one person doing it as well too. Is usually just one investigator. So that way, you know, it's not biased or, you know, there's conflicting whatever, but yeah, it takes time to schedule. It takes time to gather evidence, write the report. My reports are like 50 pages and more. So it just depends. But yeah, it takes a while sometimes too. And if you're on the employee side of it, there's also, you know, you bring in your union reps and whatever it may be. So it takes some time.
I just, I guess I would say I'm kind of surprised with that simply because if a student is having a problem with another student and it takes longer than a full semester to resolve that, then it could be that the student will decide to withdraw rather than
Mhm.
go through a whole nother semester with that problem hanging over their heads.
So that's why we have interim supportive measures, so it just depends on the situation, but we could do even before it gets to a hearing, we can always do an informal resolution, right? Where both parties agrees like, hey, you're just not gonna talk to each other, or you're just not gonna, you're gonna sit at one end of the classroom and the other one person's gonna sit in the front. So I've had it where we worked out something where like the instructor had the student sit like right by the instructor for the remaining of the semester or whatever it is. Just so they could keep eyes, and this one involved like touching, so that's why. But it just really depends on the situation, but we could do like sometimes also we'll switch sections for the students. Or say the instructor is also offering like a virtual session, then we'll switch them to a virtual or something like that too. So it's, we can make accommodations, I'll say it that way. So just for temporary, and then also, there also can be removal of the student, but only in emergency circumstances. But we're not supposed to remove students, but yeah, but we can though. All right, so we kind of talked about it a little bit, so reasonable supportive measures and modifications. So again, it has to be reasonable and it's case by case. And we can do like no contact orders, we can do counseling, disciplinary actions, and then also provide on and off campus resources as well too. And so these are our administrative regulations. So I believe district just submitted it to the Board of Trustees at their recent meeting, but we have updated them. There's the 2020 regulations and also the 2024 regulations there, because we will in time implement the 2024 regulations. So we have both of them for you all to look at, and it goes through pretty much everything that we've talked about. So if you want more information, refer back to our ARs.
I do have one question
Yeah.
for you. Several slides back, it said that the person, whoever was going in the process, could have a representative with them.
Mhm.
Does that mean attorney, or does anybody who is there to support the student?
So that's a great question. So it could be pretty much anyone. Sometimes it depends. Some have brought their attorneys, which they can, and some have brought their moms, which they can. Some have brought a friend, which they can, or, a spouse, or, another or instructor. Sometimes when we do have meetings, I do prefer other than just me up in there, just because, right? So I've had it where we had counselors in there, depending on which program they're in. We've had counselors. We've had another investigator, part of our talenting team, who is also in there as well too. So it's just so that we're all on the same page, because, a lot of these cases, it's a they said situation, right? And that's why it's very important to document. Like when I do any meetings, I pretty much transcribe the whole meeting into written form and send it to them. Like, hey, read this over. Is this an accurate description, or like, of what we talked about? And they'll say yes or whatever it is, right? And so that way they can't go back on it, because apparently some people have went back on it. They're like, no, I didn't say that, or no, that didn't happen, or, so it just, like I said, at this point, we are not trying to prove whether or not it happened, because sometimes it does, but doesn't mean it. But it's just more so like credibility issues, trying to figure out those things and figuring out whether it is probably most likely that it happened, right?
So do you record your sessions?
We sometimes do. It depends. I know we have been, it's up to the district. We're trying to, with Title IX being so big and so many new rules and regulations, we are encouraged to record, but ultimately it's up to district, and we want to keep it consistent throughout all of our colleges in our process. So right now it's just, it's not recorded, but yeah, there'll be some kind of documentation. All right, so let's go through some scenarios. The first is, a student shares with her academic advisor that one of her professor has been making unwanted advances towards her and stares at her in ways that make her while in class. For the past month, she has noticed him in places that she has never seen him before, including the local coffee shop that she works at part-time. What should the academic advisor do? So what do y'all think? And surprisingly, this is not one of my cases, but there has been issues with employees and students. So this is a common scenario.
Should probably call you.
Definitely. So I think that's the key to all of it is to call me, let me know what's going on, so I can reach out to the student and provide her with resources. So this would probably be an HR issue. I handle student on student interactions or cases. District handles anything that's employee related. But I am sometimes looped in as well to be like an advisor, an investigator, it just depends. But yeah, this will be handled by HR and they'll provide the necessary supportive measures and whatnot. But yes, the advisor should let the student know that they will be contacting me and they will be hearing from me as well. Right. So the second scenario, Dr. Smith, a professor, notices that one of their students, Jamie, seems distressed and has been absent from class frequently. After class, Jamie approaches Dr. Smith and confides that they have been experiencing harassment from a fellow student named Alex. Jamie expresses fear about reporting the behavior, worried it might escalate or affect their academic standing. So what would be Dr. Smith's obligations under Title IX?
Can you read the scenario again, please? I can't see it.
Okay, so the scenario is, Dr. Smith, notices that there is a student in his class, named Jamie, who has been distressed or seems distressed, and she has been absent from class frequently. After Jamie approaches Dr. Smith and confides that they have been experiencing harassment from a fellow student, Jamie expresses fear about reporting the behavior, and she's worried that it might escalate or affect her academic standing. So what should Dr. Smith do?
You definitely want the student to get connected with psych services because of the emotional distress the student is experiencing, right?
Okay. That is something that you could provide to the student.
And also to you,
Yes.
so that you can contact both students, right?
Yes. So, you should definitely listen and, and reassure the student that, she'll be okay and that we're here to help her. And also that, you'll be contacting me as the Title IX coordinator to further discuss with her the situation and what we could do. And, that there are resources such as psych services and outside resources as well to help her through the situation. And we can also do interim supportive measures. So depending on what the harassment is in class, we could separate them. We could maybe if there's, like I said, an online class or a different section that Dr. Smith teaches, we could put her in that if she's comfortable with that as well. Yes.
So, yeah, I'm actually going to have cases like this incorporated actually. And a lot of times what the student will do is they'll drop out, they'll just go to class.
Yeah.
And if they choose not to do so, that means depending on where it happens semester, that might be another 2/3 or half the semester. When they have to be in the same classroom. So the question is, who do you remove? Because at this point, everybody deserves fair hearing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you do, you talk to those,
Mhm.
to both parties, right?
Yeah.
How does that help?
So,
What if she is actually being harassed,
mhm.
he or she, whatever? What she basically wants to be moved.
So it just, so I'll say it this way, I've actually had many cases that are like this one, unfortunately, and so it's sometimes the student who is reporting, it's like, no, I don't want to make a formal complaint. But I just like don't want him to bother me anymore. So I'm willing to, they usually give the suggestion of like, hey, I want to just, do you have another class like I could go to, or like, can we do this like online or whatever it may be? But say that isn't the case and, they want to file a formal complaint or do a formal investigation, right? We can do an informal resolution where, sometimes the other student's like, yeah, I don't want to deal with this situation. I didn't do any of these allegations, right? So I will move out of the class. So I haven't really had issues of both parties wanting to stay in class together. Or I'll say it this way, I haven't had issues where the students, even if they were in class together, didn't feel uncomfortable enough to need to leave or not attend class anymore. So usually we figure something out. So hopefully it continues to be that way, but some cases I'll say that it's not easy and, it's usually a discussion with both parties. Yes.
Probably depends on your workload that week, but like how long does it take to get an intern?
Oh, it's usually pretty quick. I feel like I'm pretty quick. Like right when I get a notification that, hey, there is an incident, that same day, probably like within that hour, the student will respond. Yeah, so I'm pretty good with those things. It depends on the situation too. Sometimes I need to relay the information to Dr. Hall. Or like say, speak it over with like Dean Henderson, because it's a possible, student conduct issue. And so it just really depends. And I know with student conduct, sometimes like Title IX and student conduct kind of coincide a little bit. But usually we need to see if it's Title IX first, and then we'll dismiss it, and then it'll be a Sean issue. But Sean usually he can remove the student because that's what they can do on their end. So it just really depends. It depends on the severity of it. It depends on the nature of the conduct as well. So there's a lot of factors that play into it, but we are all pretty prompt. Because I'll say it this way, even on the student conduct side of things, they have a timeline of when they get to act. And they have to do it by in between, I think like 10 days or something like that. Or else it'll be like a violation of whatever regulation that they follow, or like one of the ARs or something like that. So we do try to figure it out quickly.
Question,
Mhm.
does a woman always have to be involved in these Title IX actions? Because at the beginning, you said this was originally considered a woman's protection for women, right?
Mhm.
So are Title IX scenarios, do they always involve women, or can it be a man against a man?
Definitely. It's just if it's based off of your gender, like if they're being harassed specifically by, say, if it's between two male students or something like that, or two male individuals, like say it was based off of their like sexual identity or sexual orientation, that comes into play too. Or I know we've been having some issues with pronoun usage as well too. And so that involves other, it doesn't have to always involve a woman, or sometimes it's, I've had cases where it's like a dating violence situation and involve two women. So.
When, on this question down here, it says, what are your obligations under Title IX? So would the obligation just be reporting it to you and then your obligation is done, or is there something else involved?
So it's usually, because you're a responsible employee, it would be reported to me, but usually, instructors, they will work with me to provide, supportive measures, because I'm not in your classroom. I don't manage your classroom. And so it's kind of like, we have to figure out together, like what would work best for all of us. Like say, for instance, I had a situation where, the student just asked not to be in groups with another student that they were having issues with, right? And so I'm like, yeah, we can work together on that. And then it's usually the instructor and me, and we're talking to both students about the situation, well, separately, but we're talking about the situation, say, hey, this is what we've come up with. Like, are you okay with that? And usually they are, because, they don't necessarily want to get in trouble, or they want to continue on with the class or whatever it may be. So, it usually works out. So I'm hoping that it still works out.
Okay, so then going back to her question,
Mhm.
once you've fulfilled quote unquote your Title IX obligation,
Mhm.
does that Title IX carry over into, now you're obligated to refer to psychosocial services? I mean,
No,
does the Title IX then say, once does it go farther than Title IX for an instructor's responsibility or obligation?
I don't believe so. I think it's just your obligation is just to report it to me and then we handle it. Because even for me, referring to psych services, we don't necessarily do, but we give them that option. Because again, like it's up to the individual or it's up to the student's option, what if they want to seek psych services, because some don't. Some just are like, no, I just want to get, I have one semester left, I want to just get through my classes, but I just don't want to be near this person. And so it just really depends on the situation, but as instructors, that's pretty much, you just report it to me and then we just work together and that's pretty much it. All right, so the next one is a student approaches her professor, Dr. Johnson, after class. She informs Dr. Johnson that she had recently discovered that she is pregnant and is concerned about how this might affect her coursework and participation in campus activities. The student expresses anxiety about potentially needing to take leave of absence, and she is unsure of her rights regarding accommodations. So what should Dr. Johnson do? Or if you were in that situation, what would you do? If a pregnant student came to you and like, hey, I'm pregnant, I'm kind of scared I'm gonna miss classes or.
Well, I do have a question about this because we work in the medical assisting program and one of our units is blood draws.
Mhm.
And so we have pregnant students come in and we've always said to them, you have to get a doctor's note stating that while you're pregnant, you can undergo blood draws because we don't want to put them at risk
Yeah.
physically, but in one of your earlier slides, it said that you can't require a doctor's note. for
Yeah,
things
so,
that they do. So that creates a dilemma for me anyway.
yeah, so that is something I probably need to talk with I think Lorraine Smith about.
Yeah.
So because of HIPAA, we are not necessarily allowed to ask about their medical conditions. Because I have had instructors come to me within the nursing program saying like, hey, like there's like some stuff, or like, the rat tech, whatever it is, right? Oh, there's some stuff in here that could be dangerous.
Mhm.
So what do we do? And I'm like, well, according to the rules and regulations, you can't really do anything. You can't stop the student from participating because they can, but they have, at their own risk. So I think my way around it is to, put in your syllabus or like at the beginning of class or orientation, whatever it is, like, hey, reminder students, if you're pregnant, this might not be good for your pregnancy or for whatever it is, right? And so, kind of at your own discretion, do what you want to do, but we can't stop them from participating in any activities or fulfilling the class requirements. And so, yeah, I know. And so
It was really scary because we had one student in there that fainted. I mean, she was right over. And of course, then her excuse is, well, I guess I should have eaten. I'm pregnant. She hadn't told us before that. I'm pregnant. I guess I should have eaten before we did this blood draw. And I was like, oh my goodness.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I think it's a good reminder to just have them know that, hey, speak with your doctors, but, we can only encourage them to provide documentation, but we cannot require them to
You
provide
mentioned
documentation.
earlier reasonable accommodations, like, it's gonna be specific to the class they're taking. You mentioned like,
Mhm,
if there are labs that are absolutely required,
mhm.
it might be difficult to work around that, but
Yeah.
if it's a late assignment, extending an assignment date because of some sort of condition, that would be reasonable.
Yeah, it,
It gets pretty, what's reasonable, if
yeah, so that's why I'm like, there's no definitions for reasonable. It kind of just depends. There's a lot of gray
I have
areas.
a lot of pregnant students.
Yeah.
And I just like work, I just tell them, come and talk to me and I'll
Yeah.
work with you.
Yeah.
This,
Yeah.
I mean,
You have somebody raising their hand.
I have a question.
Can you
you
put
hear
your?
me?
Yes. Yeah.
So my question is, I understand the part about we can't ask for a doctor's note, but then how would we know when going back on the slides to where, there may be a number of, days that the doctor deems necessary for absences? If we're not supposed to, obviously have a note or anything, how would we know that that's, do we just have to take their word if they say, for instance, like, oh, my doctor says I have to take the month off or something like that?
Yeah, no, I definitely get your concern. And we've had situations that you just discussed or addressed. And so at that point, if the student is kind of like in danger of failing because they've missed so much work, I usually let the student know, like, hey, here are the options. And one of those options being that it might be a good idea for you to do an EW, in which we can do. And they don't have to provide documentation for that as well. I haven't run into any encounters of students not providing any kind of documentation. I think mainly because they're worried and they're like, hey, you know, I do have issues, I do have complications in my pregnancy, so they will submit, but we don't typically ask. You could just send them my way. I can explain to them what would be considered reasonable, I guess, in that specific circumstance in your classroom, or we can have a discussion together, but there's other factors that play into it. And usually the student would take an EW at that point if they're off for a long time. They could essentially do an incomplete, but I haven't seen them do an incomplete, it's only an EW.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so I think we kind of answered this question already. So just reasonable supportive measures, right? Whatever you can do. And then, so this is for funsies. At an after work meetup, a coworker informs you that they are going through a messy divorce, and your coworker mentions that his ex-wife has been following him around town and showing up wherever he goes. While at the restaurant, your coworker, ex-wife shows up and begins to harass him and accuses him that he's having an affair with another coworker. So what are your obligations under Title IX? So this is like for HR here, but I don't handle these situations, but I have heard of stories of these, all right? But basically you have no obligation because it's something that is off campus, out of work hours, right? It's not within our scope. Unless like the wife happens to show up like on campus or something. But other than that, you don't really have an obligation. This is probably just like a friend on friend conversation. And so probably just advise a friend like, hey, you probably need like to legal up or do something. So yeah. Yeah, pretty much. But we have had situations like that. So I think that's pretty much it. Here's my contact information. I know we're running out of time. I just want to thank you all for joining us today. And hopefully you got some good valuable information. And if you need more information, just contact me. I'm pretty good at emailing back or taking your call. And yeah, pretty much. And our website is being revamped. And so there'll be a lot of information on that as well. So any other questions?
Thank you.
Well, thanks. I'm sorry that this was after lunch. I was afraid that people were gonna fall asleep a little bit because, you know, it's a lot of information. I would, but yeah, the fun stuff. There is training. I just want to remind everyone that there is annual training now for employees and students for Title IX. So you'll definitely be hearing a lot about Title IX. So fun stuff. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions. There's brochures in the back as well. My contact information on there. And Christine Phillips is the district Title IX coordinator at district. So if you have any employee related incidents, Title IX incidents, please contact her as well.
And you said this will be available with the rest of the Flex Day.
I believe so. And if not, I will send everybody this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I would like that because I'd like to use some of those slides.
If you want me to present to your class or your division, let me know. I can do that. I have done that as well in the past. So yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.